So there is a great deal of wealth of thought and value, a lot of things that you would benefit by, both accessing broadandliberty.com and thefederalist.com. And we're going to have the benefit of Kyle Sammin's wisdom with respect to the impact that environmental laws are having on progress and economic progress, particularly as this impacts transportation locally and nationally. So I'm looking forward to that in the 8:30 segment. Just to close up this this segment before we go. I want to maybe circle back to something that Gloria from South Philly was saying. And I personally know Gloria, and she's a woman of great accomplishment and a woman of an era where it was difficult for women to break through in certain professions. I mean, there were certain professions that were uniquely feminine, female, the nursing professions, the teaching professions, service professions. And I don't think it's coincidental that women both went into that profession at a higher rate, those professions at a higher rate than men, and also probably excelled in those professions because of, and here I'm going to completely go counter to what I was saying before, there is an innate ability to nurture that women have. But I don't think that that's biological necessarily, even though that we're the ones that give birth. I think it's societal. I think women have been trained because of tradition and culture. So, I mean, you do have to recognize that as a result of training, tradition, nurture as opposed to nature, there are some attributes that people have based on gender. There are some attributes that people have based on race, on the way that they've been treated in society. Attributes that people have based on national origin, I would say as well, being an immigration attorney. But to make those in this day and age, in 2020 and 2021, the metric by which we measure someone's worth and value is very counterproductive. It's very problematic. I have a nephew. I love my 12-year-old nephew. I do not want some girl power crazy teacher placing obstacles in his path because of some idea that maybe she does not even admit to herself, that girls need to be privileged, girls need to be advanced, girls need special attention, girls need special STEM training. To me, and Christina Hoff Sommers wrote a wonderful book years ago called The War on Boys, which I would ask all of you or suggest that all of you read, because it is as valid today as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So, the whole point is, why can't we just, and I think this is what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wanted us to do, why can't we just look at people as people? Why can't we just take people as human beings and not see them through this prism of their, as I said, these irrelevancies like race and gender and sexual orientation and all of that stuff. Why can't we all just, as Rodney King said, why can't we all just get along together? We're going to take a break and we will be back. I have my friend Kyle Sammin, who's going to be coming on and talking about a topic that is really important. And again, it has to do with the intersection between environmental policy and economic affluence, economic development. But this could apply to a lot of different situations, not just environmental policy, health policy. How does government regulation impact economic development? And particularly in this area, I've lived in Delaware County. In fact, today is the 51st anniversary of my moving into my house in Havertown in Delaware County. And when I moved in, they were still talking about building the Blue Route. And the Blue Route had been on the book since the 1950s, and it was called the Blue Route because on the maps it was blue lined. It was in blue ink. And they didn't start building the Blue Route, I think, until sometime in the 1980s. And and it was because of community opposition, not necessarily government regulation, community opposition, but they sometimes go hand in hand. So without further ado, I would love to welcome into the program Kyle Sammin, who is a senior columnist for The Federalist and a columnist for my favorite media source website, favorite among all of the ones that I read. And I urge you, those of you who are probably listen to Chris on a regular basis are already very familiar with its excellence, Broad and Liberty. Hi, Kyle. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Christine. Thanks for having me on.
No, I really appreciate you coming on. It's still fairly early, although I've been here since 5:30 in the morning, Eddie and I, so it feels like half of my day is over already. You wrote a great piece at Broad and Liberty about the governmental environmental policy and impact on the light rail, on building of light rail in King of Prussia. And so, well, give us a little bit of background, first of all, as to how long has this been on the books and what area are we talking about, and how would this benefit the community?
Sure. I mean, what we're talking about is the King of Prussia spur of the Norristown high-speed line, and it's a 4.5-mile planned rail line that would come off of the Norristown line, which used to be called the Route 100, and it would just go over to King of Prussia Mall and then to the business park behind that, and the Valley Forge Casino. And this is, one of the busiest areas in our region. A lot of businesses there, a lot of, shopping, housing too. And if you ever try to drive there, especially this time of year, it's a mess.
It's crazy, yeah.
Because a lot of the roads haven't gotten any bigger since they built them all. If you drive up Gulf Road, they're all called Gulf Road out that way, but there's like 6 different Gulf Roads, and they're all packed with traffic. And so SEPTA has been thinking about this for a while, and since 2013 has been planning the process to bring a rail line there so people could find a different way to get there than sitting on the Schuylkill all day.
Yeah. And you would think that the environmental activists would love this because it would be less pollution. You'd have fewer cars on the road, fewer emissions. I mean, light rail I take it all the time. And, the Norristown high-speed line and or the Market Frankfurt L, I think public transportation is fantastic, and it really is a benefit. So why are they having a problem getting this thing, built?
Well, it's funny because, like you say, a lot of environmentalists do like it. They don't want more cars on the road. That's kind of their big thing. So, but the law, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1970, which was created to address some of the problems of stuff just getting bulldozed without consultation and roads being built, through neighborhoods. What it does is it gives a few people the leverage through the law to really hold up projects. So, like I said, they've been planning this since 2013. It's still in the planning stage. They haven't laid down 1 pound of concrete. It's still, they're
crazy.
Still talking about it.
In 2013, it does. It reminds me of the Blue Route. I mean, I arrived in Havertown in 1969, and they had been talking about it for almost 20 years at that point. And then they didn't do anything for another 15 years after we moved in. It was like, I think, the mid-'80s when they started the Blue Route.
Yeah, and the Blue Route's one of the even worse examples of this kind of policy, because then the environmentalists were against it. Plus, there was a lot of, like you said earlier, a lot of local concerns. People didn't want this and that. It was too close to this house. And unlike the King of Prussia Rail project, the Blue Route actually had to bulldoze some things.
Right, exactly.
The King of Prussia Rail is snaking in between the turnpike and some land owned by Pico, and it's not actually going to bring down any houses. It's just it's fitting in among the road structure that's already out there.
So what's the problem? What's the issue? What's the holdup?
Well, what happens is, it's just that the process is long, and it's not written to be long the way the law is. The planners are supposed to look at every person and property that is supposed to be impacted by the new construction. And that's not a bad idea, to consider impacts on the community when you're building something. I mean, the reason the law was written is because in the 50s and 60s, they were just building highways through neighborhoods, bulldozing stuff, not really consulting people. It was all top-down decisions, and Especially through poor neighborhoods, nobody was sticking up for them.
Right.
So they made this law that would require more consultation. But what it does is, after the agency, in this case SEPTA, comes up with this big study of everything that's impacted, then everybody whose property everybody who owns a property or lives in the area who thinks they should be impacted and aren't on the list, they can sue to get included. Or if they say, sometimes you're listed as being impacted, but it's not an adverse impact, and they can say, no, that impact actually is adverse. We're going to go to court to get it included.
Oh, wow.
And that's what takes so long because, like anything going through the court system, it can take, more than a year sometimes 2 years. And
does anybody have standing to sue? Or do you have to live in the area? Or, what gives you standing to bring them into court?
That's another problem is sometimes national organizations that are dedicated to some sort of maybe historic preservation will be able to sue, even if they're not in the area. They may have never seen this construction, but they'd say, well, that passes by this historic site. Maybe it's too close to this park or it's too close to this historic home and it's going to ruin it, or, the vibrations will shake it apart, or it's just going to pollute it. And they have standing to sue because you don't even have to live in the area. You don't even have, it could be a nonprofit that has nationwide reach and just raises funds and sues in all these different projects.
That's crazy. At least with the Blue Route, the people that were opposing it were neighbors, people that were, near neighbors concerned about it. But that's outrageous that someone could just swoop in from California, after they've taken care of their little spotted owl and worry about what's happening with light rail in King of Prussia.
Yeah, and it not only does it delay the process, but it doesn't let the planners think big either. Like if you look at the maps on the SEPTA King of Prussia Rail website, they stop just short of Valley Forge Park, which would be a good place to, if you wanted to, take a bike ride up there or have a picnic or go for a hike.
Absolutely.
And you don't have a car, it's hard to get there. You could take this rail up there, it would be perfect. But the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, they call it, limits especially development near parks and historic sites. So if they had put that rail just another half mile or mile longer, it would have doubled the challenges, because then you would have had even more national organizations, historic groups, saying that having the train come up just around the side of this park would ruin it somehow.
Yeah.
So
you remember the battle with Antietam? Remember the battle the battlefield of Antietam when I think they wanted to erect. Now in that case, I understand they wanted to erect a shopping mall, but this is something that you're saying it's within limits. They're doing a cost benefit analysis here, and there wouldn't be any damage to Valley Forge.
Right, and I think that they don't even propose that because I think they know that it would be politically impossible because of all the challenges and all the delays, and it would sink the whole project. So they think small, and this is still a good project. I don't think, we in Philly love to blame SEPTA for everything. I think they're doing their best here. It's just they're constrained by what the law is and what all the challenges how they would limit them.
Yeah, and it is a shame too, because what really boggles my mind is that pretty much anyone has standing to sue. It's sort of federalizing a local issue. It's making local transportation. Some guy out in California doesn't care if we can get to the King of Prussia Mall without having to do, the circuitous routes and get stuck in traffic. They're just doing it because they have some kind of general, ideology about the environmental impact of development. And it's, like you said, I agree 1,000%. It doesn't allow the planners to think big. They're constantly playing defense. They're constantly worrying about where the next attack is going to come from.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And bringing those outside agents or independent groups that are able to sue who don't live here, allowing that separates the risk from the reward. They are not going to be inconvenienced if the project fails because they never drive on those roads. But, they think it's in their interest to, save every bird or whatever it is that they're interested in.
Save every bird. That's going to be a bumper sticker. Save every bird.
We have a lot of birds.
I know. I think if we took a poll of the birds, they'd say, yeah, we don't care. We're fine. Leave us alone.
Yeah. And that's what made me start researching this project, too, is just because this is something normally that people on the left would like. but it's the federal regulations written by the left in the 70s that's delaying the project. And it's kind of mind-boggling to see that not only the time delay forever, but the costs go up, because every time the time is delayed, it's because they have to go to court and they have to pay lawyers.
Right.
And then if they lose, they have to rewrite the project to take into account the changes that the court has imposed. So when this thing was proposed in 2016, 2013, it was supposed to cost $1 billion, which is already a lot for 5 miles of rail.
Yeah.
But by now, it's projected to cost twice that.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's crazy. And, like you said, and the irony is they're cutting off their nose to spite their face. This is something that, as we said before, is public transportation, light rail is something that really helps individuals or really addresses the concerns of environmentalists. And yet, because they're handcuffing essentially the people who are the engineers and the builders, it's like, again, they're cutting off their noses to spite their faces. Now, you mentioned something in the article which I found interesting. When President-elect Joe Biden becomes President-elected Joe Biden, we're going to have someone in the White House who has very famously been a friend of the rail system. He used to take, maybe still does, Amtrak back to Wilmington almost every evening when he was in D.C. as a senator. So do you think that that's going to have some kind of an impact? Do you think that having him there will change not just the focus for this King of Prussia project, but elsewhere in the United States on transportation projects like this?
I hope so, but I don't think it will, because I think it requires him to really dedicate a lot of political capital to standing up to very specific lobbyists from the environmental movement, and also to actually changing the law. I mean, this law was written mostly about highways. It shouldn't probably apply to a public transit system that's not even destroying anything, really. It's just it's not bulldozing a neighborhood, which is what this is supposed to prevent.
Well, it's crazy. It's like they have their nose in this tiny, tiny little corner of the country where they really, why are they even interested? Why is this even a concern? Well, Kyle, that was great. So how can people follow you? Do you have a Twitter handle? Are you on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Kyle Sammin, KyleSammin. I have a website too, KyleSammin.com. And you can always find a lot of my stuff at Broad and Liberty, like you said, or at the Federalist. Both
of which are, believe me, sustenance for the soul in these crazy times. Broad and Liberty in particular is just an exceptional media resource. And I think, I would command everyone to go and read Kyle's pieces and all of the other wonderful commentary and reporting, original reporting that you're going to get at Broad and Liberty that you're not going to get elsewhere in this area. So, Kyle, thank you so much. Happy holidays to your family. And, when I'm back on again, I would love to have you back on again on the show. And I know Chris is going to have you on as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and happy holidays to you too.
Take care. Take care.